All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you that almost everything we think we know about time, from sci-fi movies all the way to theoretical physics, is based on one single fundamental mistake? Well, today we're digging into a pretty radical challenge to how we see time, and it's all based on the manifesto of a thinker named Edward Gomez. And this is the core idea right here. Gomez isn't trying to tear science down. He's making this passionate case to pull it back from these super abstract theories and ground it firmly in what you and I can actually see and experience in the real world. Which, of course, brings us to the big one. If our whole understanding is kind of flawed, then what is the true nature of time? Well, this explainer is going to walk you through Gomez's very controversial answer.
So his rebellion starts by taking aim at all the popular ideas about time we see everywhere, especially in movies like Interstellar. He just dismisses all of it with one single word: malarkey.
So just forget that idea of a space-time fabric that can be bent and warped by gravity. And forget thinking about time as some fourth dimension you could, in theory, travel through. The manifesto flat out says these are just misleading metaphors, ideas that have taken us way, way down the wrong path.
Okay, so if time isn't a dimension, then where did science go so wrong? Well, according to Gomez, it all starts with a simple but absolutely profound error. We confused our instruments for the thing they're supposed to measure. This breakdown makes the distinction crystal clear. Over on the left, you got clocks. They're just tools, right? Mechanical things that tick, that measure atomic vibrations, and yeah, they are definitely affected by things like gravity and speed. But on the right, you have time as Gomez defines it, the actual unstoppable process of change, of decay, of aging. One is just a device. The other, that's reality. And here is his sharpest criticism. You know that famous idea of time dilation, that clocks in space or in high gravity tick slower? Well, Gomez argues that when physicists measure that, they're not seeing time itself slow down. No, they're just seeing a clock's mechanism reacting to some pretty extreme conditions. They've become experts on the instrument, not the actual phenomenon. So if time isn't what a clock tells us, what is it? Well, the manifesto offers this really powerful alternative, and it roots the idea of time in one of the most fundamental laws of the entire universe. The answer is entropy. You might remember it as the second law of thermodynamics. It's that inescapable rule that everything tends to move from order to disorder. Think of a hot cup of coffee on your desk. It always cools down, right? The heat spreads out. It never gathers itself back into the cup. For Gomez, this isn't something that happens in time. This irreversible process is time itself. And this just illustrates the whole thing perfectly. It's so simple, you can see it, it's totally irreversible, and it happens every single time. This is the arrow of time right there in your kitchen. But this principle, it scales way, way up to the entire cosmos. A star's whole life is just this long, slow process of burning through its fuel, expanding, and eventually fading away. It's a brilliant, massive display of entropy on a cosmic scale. And it governs every living system, from a single cell to a huge ecosystem. Everything follows this one-way path, from ordered complexity to eventual decay. This forward march of entropy seems universal, but what if it isn't? What if, just like clocks, it could be slowed down by physics? And that question leads to this fascinating challenge he throws down to mainstream science. Gomez says, forget the atomic clocks, let's test life itself. Put an orange on a satellite in orbit and leave another one right here on Earth. Does the one in orbit, where a clock would tick just a tiny bit differently, actually rot slower? He claims there is absolutely no evidence that biological decay, that entropy in action, is actually affected by gravity or speed at all. And this brings us to what is maybe the most provocative part of the whole manifesto. This is where he accuses modern theoretical physics of drifting away from testable science and basically becoming a form of entertainment. Just look at this list: wormholes, multiverses, these closed time-like curves, which is just a fancy way to talk about time travel. According to Gomez, these concepts sound a lot more like Hollywood scripts than verifiable reality. They're mathematical possibilities that have been spun into this grand cosmic theater. And he does not pull any punches. He sees these super complex theories as just elaborate buildings with no solid foundation in the real world.
just beautiful ideas dressed up in the language of science. Now, one of the most compelling parts of his argument is this breakdown of how fiction can actually bleed into what we perceive as fact. He outlines this whole progression. First, a powerful story just captures everyone's imagination. Then it becomes a cultural touchstone. Pretty soon, the media starts asking, hey, could this ever be real? The public starts to think, well, maybe. And then, finally, some scientists might even start trying to justify the fiction instead of just sticking to the data. And look, this has real consequences. Gomez argues that this whole cosmic soap opera wears away at public trust because it blurs the line between science and entertainment, and it distracts from the real, sometimes boring, but absolutely vital work of solving tangible problems right here on Earth. So where does all this leave us? Well, the Manifesto's conclusion brings this huge cosmic argument all the way back down to a simple, human, and really philosophical scale. Okay, so let's just quickly recap the core pillars of this rebellion. First, time is entropy in action, not some dimension. Second, clocks are just tools. They aren't time itself. Third, without matter and change, the concept of time is basically meaningless. Fourth, a lot of modern physics has drifted into storytelling. And finally, science has to get back to observable, irreversible reality.
This analogy just nails the central problem, doesn't it? Gomez is basically saying that many scientists have become so mesmerized by their beautiful maps, these elegant mathematical formulas, that they've completely forgotten to look at the actual terrain of the physical world. And so, the Manifesto leaves us with this final, really provocative choice. Are we going to keep obsessing over the instrument, over the measurement, over the ticking of the clock? Or are we going to ground our understanding of time in the direct, undeniable lived experience of irreversible change? In the simple, profound act of watching a flower age